Good morning, I'm Bill from CoolWildlife.com. This morning I am in my kayak. It's a beautiful morning, the sun hasn't yet come up, so we're going to take a paddle down to the end of the lake and see what we can find. Welcome aboard! As we watch this scene unfold, I'll tell you a little story. So you take a look at the size of those cygnets now. They have no feathers, and it's July the 10th. In October, late October, mid to late October, these cygnets are going to be large enough and start to look like Mom and Dad and will begin to fly. Mom and Dad will take them down to the end of the bay where we started paddling from today, and they will flap and take off with cygnets in tow. A few of them will lift off and follow Mom and Dad, and a few will stay behind and not figure it out. And that will continue until they all fly. Last year there were 4 cygnets. 3 eventually took off. 1 did not. We're potentially going to get a wing flap. Very nice. It's fun to watch because Mom and Dad will then fly everybody back to the lone cygnet, and they will continue to repeat that every half hour or so in my observation until that the one that wouldn't take off gets its confidence up and joins the group, and then they all fly off happily ever after and migrate south wherever they go. Now, my swans will stick around actually for the winter. I see them on the ice in the winter. There are areas at the locks that stay open as the water flows through, and so they continue to feed there through the winter now. And there's some interesting photography to be had there on the really cold days when it's minus 25 Celsius. You get a beautiful mist on the water with the swans. Excellent photography if you can bear to be out in minus 25. But it's those kind of conditions that often lend themselves to the absolute best photography. Alright, so we have some preening behavior. Even the little ones are all preening. What are we looking for in this scene? If we were going to be shooting stills, we just had our wing flap. That's fairly predictable. When these swans preen, generally speaking, they wing flap, which you just saw with one of the cygnets. Not nearly as impressive as the 7-foot wingspan of the adult swan, but what we're looking for are certain behaviors here. So when we're following trumpeter swans, we're going to be, if they start to preen, we're going to be looking for tells of wing flaps. Everybody loves a 7-foot wingspan with a reflection on the water. So pay attention to the behavior of the species. Know that when these birds preen, they generally flap. And that's a great time. Now, interesting, you see that ruffle. Sometimes it's not a total wing flap, it's just a ruffling, but they bring their feathers back into place, and then they move on. So if you want to capture a wing flap, watch for preening, and be ready to roll with your still. And I take bursts of that. Right, so your camera will shoot at 5 frames a second, 8 frames a second. My D5 I think is 12 frames a second. I'm going to burst, so I'm just going to hold down that shutter and fire away through the whole series, and then you get to pick out the one image that you think captures the perfect wing flap. There might be a catch light in the eye that isn't present in some, having the wing fully spread out versus tucked in somewhat. Just looking for what within the image catches your eye. Which one do you like the best? And out of probably a burst of 50 pictures for a wing flap, you'll pick the one that you like the best. Now, I'm a bit of a collector of feathers. And so when our swan did a wing flap, she or he left a little something behind for us floating on the water. And actually, it's kind of a neat video with that perfect reflection in the water. I'm kind of liking it. So I'm going to take a still image of the feather on the water. We're shooting some video of it, and then I'm going to go collect it. All right, let's talk about camera settings for a moment. Right now I'm shooting at f11. Why am I doing that? Well, I was not expecting that wing flap, but I'm glad that I was focused on it. Why am I shooting at f11? I am doing that because I want to keep my subjects, and note I said subjects, I've got a cygnet and a swan, and I want them both to be in focus. So the higher I take my f-stop, the more in focus or the more depth of field I have. Right? If I was shooting at f2.8, one of the subjects would not be in focus and the other one would be, whichever one I was focused on. And that's not a bad thing. Sometimes I want that. I want to have the primary subject in focus and things in the background out of focus, especially backgrounds like the weeds or trees or what have you. I want those to fade out of the picture. But if I'm shooting multiple subjects in the same scene like a swan, and it has cygnets, and some of those cygnets are in front of the adult swan and some are behind, and I want them all in focus, then I'm going to take my f-stop up, f10, f11, f13, that kind of thing. If I want to bleed out the background with that bokeh that's blurred, that's lovely, and I have one subject, then I will drop it down to 2.8 or f4. And just play with my ISO a little bit from an exposure point of view. So think about those things when you're actually out shooting, whether stills or video. Think about how you want the picture to render and use the appropriate settings. All right, the wind is starting to pick up even in the little bay here, so I can just imagine what it's like out on the big water. We're going to have an interesting paddle home this morning. Now you see that churning motion? The adult is using very large webbed feet to churn up the bottom, and then the little ones feed on top. When they're very small, the little ones aren't feeding on their own at all. So they rely on the adults to churn up the bottom and they feed. So that's what she's doing right now. These guys are quite a bit larger, quite a bit. Probably 10 times the size they were when I was shooting them, days after they were born. We've got a nice moment here. We're just going to let it unfold. The adults are feeding, everybody's cool. And the cygnets, and there are 5 of them, are just hanging out and feeding as well. It's fairly calm here in the end of the day. So we'll just see. We just sit and observe and watch and see what happens. Now if I was shooting stills, you saw the cygnet just came up into a little wing flap there. Not terribly exciting, but when the adult does it with a 7-foot wingspan, it's well worth capturing. And one of the things that I've noticed as the swans, after they come up from pulling their head up, let's watch and see. They usually shake their heads, and if the light is right, you end up getting quite a nice cascading of water off their feathers. There we go. And so that can make for some interesting photography as well, especially if you're backlit. You'll get, it's quite enhanced. Let's see if we can go over to the other swan and see if we can't get him coming up, shaking his head with a little bit of backlighting. And we're going to have to be patient because the sun just went in behind clouds, so backlighting is not really an option at this point. What we'll do is observe the behaviors so we know exactly what's going to happen. So see, when that bird came out of the water, he shook his head. Even without the backlighting, it can be interesting. You want to be ready for that when you're taking stills. We're going to work this scene together. When this swan comes up, we're going to be ready for the head shake. There we go. And you heard that I did a burst of probably about 10 shots there. You've got to get the head just right and the spray just right in order to nail this shot. So I am shooting at f8. I want to keep my shutter speed up around 1200. I could go even faster. Let's see, I'm going to take it up to 1600. So I'm shooting 1600 f8. There's the head shake. Okay, we're back down again. And we are just waiting now for the swan to come up. And when that head starts to surface, we shoot. Alright. Are you ready? As soon as that head starts to come up, we fire. We just hold down, we're focused on the bird, and we shoot. And a burst of about 8 shots should capture most of what we want. Make sure our exposures are right and our histogram looks fine. So we're back to shooting. Hands up. We will be ready. And there's the head shake with a cygnet in the foreground. We're shooting at f8. I'm probably going to want to be at about f10 for that shot to get them both in focus. We'll see. But that's the adjustment I'm going to make right now, is taking that up to f10. So now we're shooting 1600 f10, and we've had to pump our ISO up to 1000. Why did we do that? Because we wanted to be able to keep the light the way we wanted it. And so as you increase your shutter speed or take your f-stop up, you start to lose light. And in doing so, picture becomes darker. So we compensate by taking the ISO up. You have to know your camera in this situation. I'm only shooting right now at ISO 1000, which on my Nikon D5 is quite reasonable. I can take it up to 6400 if I need to, and it's fine. But some cameras aren't going to be able to do that. So my suggestion to you is you get to know your camera. Take some pictures at ISO starting at 200, go to 400, go to 800, go to 1600, 3200 and everything in between, and see what you get. How grainy, how noisy is that picture? Take them back into post, take a look at them, and you decide for your camera what is the maximum that you'll go. I set my D850 at 3200. I don't let it go above 3200. Past that, I'm not pleased with the results, so I don't want it to go there. Right now I'm shooting on manual mode. Let's get back to our swans here. Right now I'm shooting on manual mode with an auto ISO. And what do I mean by that? Well, auto ISO allows me to let the camera change the ISO settings based on the settings that I have in the camera. So I'm shooting at f10 and I'm shooting at a shutter speed of 1600, and I'm allowing the auto ISO to decide what ISO it needs in order to keep the exposure correct. Alright, we're anchored a little better. Let's see if we can't do this together. There, we just missed a really nice shot, but it's going to get even better because if this swan goes down right by the cygnets, we are going to get our shot of swan spray with cygnet. And wait for it. That head should be coming up any moment now. Let's get you back. And there we go. We got a picture of our swan and cygnet. Good God. It is blowing out here. I am, I don't know if you can see this. You probably can't tell that I'm moving as fast as I'm moving, but I am being blown across this swamp right now. You can see how the wind's blowing the feathers, which actually is quite nice. And let's see, I'm not ready with my camera. We're churning, and I'm actually coming towards some nice lilies, so maybe I can get in this lily pad, park it, so that we don't get blowing all over the place like we are now. This is getting crazy out here. And we've got two cygnets going rogue on us right now. They're actually coming over to the boat. Hi guys, how's it going? I'm going to see how close we are. Got cygnets right off the end of the boat. Adults with them. Everybody's quite chilled, so no issue. Our cygnets and swans, trumpeter swans to be specific, and we know that because of their black bill as opposed to the orange bill of a mute swan, are feeding now. And let's see if we can't. There's one little guy I really want to take you in on that I'd be shooting stills of for sure, as he's feeding on the reeds. Lighten that up for you a little bit. Nice flowers from the lily pads. Got this little guy feeding. On the lily, which is, I'm sorry, but I got to get this amazing still shot. I'm going to let you enjoy the scenery while I try to get a few stills here. We got this little guy chewing on some reeds, which is quite nice. As you watch this scene unfold, you decide where you'd be shooting. There's a nice flower by the adult, the far adult, a lily pad flower, which is being blocked by the other adult right now. But if one of the little ones decides, there we go, we're using that flower in the foreground. And waiting for somebody to come along to make use of it. Let me show you what I was looking at, because I got a little distracted there. Let's just get in on that. What I was focused on was that lily pad flower, and they're heading around the corner, and there's two more over there, so we're going to head over and see if we can get some more of those shots with lily pad flowers. Okay, right now we're going to use that flower when that head comes up to grab a shot, a still shot of the shakes and the flower in the background. And there it is. And we're going to get a second shot at it. So here we go. Waiting for the head to come up. 1600 on the shutter speed. We've got our exposure just perfect. We are focused on his head. Up he comes. And the flower is in the background. And he's going to let us do it even again. Isn't that nice? Okay, here we go. We are ready to shoot when that head comes up. We are pre-focused on the neck. Waiting for the head to come up. Flowers in the background. Lovely. We're getting a few shots of this. And I am shooting at f10 because I'd like that flower to be in the picture and focused somewhat. Alright, here we go. Ready for another one. Head's coming up shortly. Pre-focused on the neck, F10. Fast shutter speed. And a burst so that we get the action. Now if I moved over to the left a little bit, we'd probably get an even better shot, but it's too windy and I'm parked in lily pads, so I'm going to stay where I am for the moment. Get you guys moved over so you can see the action. Pre-focused on the neck. And the flower was not in the photo that time. Hi, I'm Bill from CoolWildlife.com, and we're out on our Flower in the Lily Pad tour. This is one of the highlights of the year. I'm kidding, of course. We're in this back little swamp, and back here there are beaver, otter, mink, deer, green herons, blue herons, raccoons. I've seen all kinds of wildlife back here. It's just a matter of being patient and listening. In the meantime, though, and this is wildlife photography, it could turn into a 4-hour flower amongst the lily pad tour. So you have to be very patient as a wildlife photographer and wait for wildlife to unfold around you. It is probably the very best stress management I could recommend. Sitting in a kayak in a swamp, listening to the sound of birds and frogs all around me. I could sit here for an hour and shoot nothing and go home quite happy.